Hey everybody, sorry for the delay here. Lot of stuff going on in Bangkok here, and transit and whatnot is it's difficult. To make matters worse, my computer got bricked earlier, and so all of my normal libp2p slides got like busted. So I'm gonna rely on the slides from the last project update, and I'll give more of a verbal thing, and then I'll use some slides from other things. So I'll be hopping around in a few slide decks. So I don't single. Can you hear me? There we go. The mic, I don't know if that's like hurting the recording. Dave, the mic I think keeps going in and out. I don't know if that'll hurt the recording, just so you know. Great. So I'll just give a quick libp2p project update. I'll try to do it fairly quickly and then just get a bit of Q&A. And I'll rely on the structure from February. Again, I'll do a quick project recap of sort of where we are, some of the community upgrades. I'll give you updates on the core fund, and I'll talk a bit about the libp2p retro PGF round which was really awesome, and then I'll in the latter part wanted to share some of the thoughts from the Cypherpunk Congress that we had yesterday. Ways of that entire thing is just how critical the networking stack is, and how critical improvements to the network stack are to make, and I want to bring a little bit of that conversation here. So as a quick recap of libp2p is now this amazing success story of the entire crypto community coming together to adopt one common standard for networking. It's got hundreds of thousands of libp2p nodes. These stats are outdated by a year, but it just gives you a sense of the scale of the network. Dashboard that automatically updates with price feeds, because I think that would be super useful for everyone to see the amount of money secured by libp2p. But these are like outdated numbers. This is probably like way higher. And so a range of implementations secure the whole of the crypto network world. There's also a lot of projects and protocols that are not as visible to us in the outside of the cryptocurrency community. I keep hearing about all kinds of enterprise use cases and government use cases and like large company use cases that rely on libp2p or IPFS, and of course IPFS relies on libp2p. I learned recently that like a huge fraction of the financial records of India as a country are secured by IPFS and therefore libp2p. And so like you have now nation states depending on the libp2p infrastructure layer, which is like super awesome to see. So I think that this is like a way underestimate by a large fraction, and so today it might be like 500 or 700 billion in value and beyond. libp2p is like this great success of bringing together a range of participants and contributors from many different implementations and projects across the entire community. We have a range of implementations. I think there's more than these. These are like the main ones, but there's a few others as well. And this has been like this triumph of hundreds of people around the world collaborating on a project of projects. The libp2p community in general brings together a lot of participants from many other projects to collaborate on a public good. So this is a great example of people building high quality public goods together and distributing them to each other around the world. So in the last year or so, we about last year we announced some project-wide changes in terms of building a foundation and a core fund for supporting the project. So I'll give a couple of updates on that. This is what the update looked like in February, where we had initially about a year ago we had the plan for the fund. We had this 3-program structure. We secured some funding from PL to do it, and we announced it. Then in February, we bootstrapped and set up the core fund structure. We participated in the Optimism Retro PGF round 3, and we were booting up like our own programs to be able to reward participants. The kind of like graph looked a little bit like this at the time, and we kind of like showed this diagram in the past. We've gotten some feedback along the way that the names here are a little bit confusing, so we're going to replace the DAO voting name with just proactive PGF, so that people understand it's not retroactive PGF, it's proactive PGF. The GP voting thing we'll just describe as normal grants, so that way people like understand what that means. And RetroPGF is now a well-established structure, so we can keep that name. So this structure is live already. This is what it looked like a year ago. Then in February, it looked like this. And since then, a few things have happened. So first, I'll describe the RetroPGF program in general as an example, because then I'll go into the libp2p one. Actually, raise your hand if you are super familiar with RetroPGF, so I don't have to like explain it all in detail. Yeah, only about half. Cool. So the way that RetroPGF works is that this is an example of a public goods mechanism, meaning a public goods mechanism is a structure that a community uses to come together and collect opinions on what should be funded. And you take those opinions and combine them with some capital that has been raised for the community, and you fund the things that the community has decided to vote. You can imagine there's all kinds of mechanisms that you could create. You can create different voting schemes. You can create different co-funding type matching schemes. You could use things like quadratic funding. You could use many different kinds of systems. RetroPGF, which Optimism has now rebranded as retrofunding, is one such mechanism, and is structured in a series of rounds. At each round, a community of badge holders, which are critical in some community, which is a small subset that is meant to be representative of the interests of the community, get together and vote on a set of projects. Projects apply for that funding, the badge holders vote on them, there's some distribution of the funding, and then that's released on a per round basis. So you can imagine that as rounds continue, various projects can continue applying for later milestones. And so over time, the mechanism adjusts to what the community keeps thinking is valuable to contribute and whatever projects are emerging. The Optimism community has been running this now for, I think, a couple of years. They had 3 rounds last year, and I think this year they're doing a number of other rounds. And it's been a huge success so far. Like there's been both large amounts of money flowing through this, but really hundreds to thousands of projects that have benefited from this, because each of those projects sometimes has downstream dependencies. So it's a really good success case story of networks at scale funding public goods. And a really neat feature of this is that these networks, as they get more valuable, and as they set norms that are copied, over time, this particular structure will then end up replicating, and all kinds of underlying open source infrastructure or public goods can get funded this way. This is not yet funding research. That's one of my kind of like next hopes for a lot of this stuff, is to be able to start funding research with these components, but we'll get there. Here are some screenshots from rounds 1, 2, and 3. I don't yet have the screenshots for the 4 and 5, which have happened since, but this entire process is a public thing that you can look at, inspect, and suggest changes to. So this program changes quite a bit every single round that happens, and the program has been evolving with time. And overall, this mechanism in Optimism is working. libp2p was it was this really amazing situation where Optimism depends on libp2p and Ethereum depends on libp2p. libp2p applied as a project and got rewarded greatly by the Optimism community for building this foundational building block that helps build this as a network. So it's a great example of the dependence of this system coming together, and at least a subset of them coming together and funding the public goods that they rely on. This is also like this very good model for how libp2p itself can fund our own public goods. And so we decided to run our own round in the libp2p community. And I'll talk about that. Actually, I'll give an example of that since I'm talking about it. Search it. Thought I had it open. Yeah, there we go. So earlier in the year, in around April, we talked about how we're going to do a RetroPGF round for the libp2p community. This was discussed in GitHub. We used GitHub to do all of the applications. Then we used I think the Gitcoin tooling for actually submitting actually having the proper application review process. And then I think this landed already, right? Let's see the blog. Yeah, so it landed already. How many people participated as batch holders in there? A few, awesome. What are your quick takes and reflections from both of you? Like, what were your thoughts on the program and the system? So overall, like, hey, glad that we're doing this public goods sort of structure. Excited to participate. Good that we're doing this. Thank you, by the way, for participating. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Great. That's good to hear. We'll see how this evolves over time as we start running more rounds. The retro funding community in general is exploring a lot of different types of mechanisms that we can use. Some of those are orienting more towards specific metrics and rewarding metrics, because that's you can calculate some concrete metric space. That of course is not easy for qualitative improvements to the stack. And so I do think that having the batch builder structure enables you to catch some really important things. However, once you scale it to the optimism scale, you end up with problems around see how they work over time. Cool. So that's kind of like the RetroPGF round that we ran. Since then, also, so this was kind of like the update before. Since then, two the core fund to support libp2p, so huge success there. Also to the Ethereum Foundation, which also donated to the network. That's about, I think, 500K-ish OP, which today is probably 700 or 800K-ish. And so I need to again, I had a whole range of slides that we should do it. Awesome. Fight in the community for that. Get more folks. And so this is now at the around 4 million scale. So we're about over here today. I'll get this updated and put into a blog post sometime soon. We're basically close to the 6 million mark that we described a year ago, which is really, really, really cool. And yeah, thank you to all the folks that contributed to this, because we're in a much better place. What I would like to do in the long term is to do a lot of this directly on chain. I want to move the fundraising mechanisms themselves to happen on chain and to enable networks like Optimism and others to fund the project directly on chain. I'll describe kind of a version of that using the Falcon network as a concrete example, but you can imagine how these networks can flow into libp2p. So Falcon is an example of a particular crypto network. It has some set of resources. It might have some entities that are funding projects directly. And so over time, what you can develop a series of mechanisms on chain, things like failed RetroPGF, which is Filecoin's version of RetroPGF, or some kind of proactive mechanism for Filecoin. And you can start coupling these mechanisms directly on chain with specific weights in some distribution. So if anyone wants to fund public goods in Filecoin, they give money to that node, and that gets distributed down various mechanisms down to the participants developing public goods. You can also imagine applications or L2s that depend on Filecoin itself doing the same thing and funding Filecoin public goods. And you can think of the crypto network. In Filecoin's case, there's a crypto network involved. There's a currency flow. So you can imagine funding public goods in that way directly. Now imagine, I'm going to be making some diagrams about this for libp2p in the future, but you can imagine a structure for libp2p where you have a set of these mechanisms. Again, this is kind of like what these look like, and you can start flowing specific blockchain rewards directly into the libp2p project and funding libp2p project activity. And so part of what we need to do that is transfer what today are a bunch of on-paper contracts and conversations into direct mechanisms on chain that could over time adjust themselves. Meaning, imagine a whole crypto network directly, so not just entities or foundations or groups that are donating, but direct on-chain mechanisms with currency flows going directly to the project. And so that's kind of like where I would like to shift the funding landscape for these kinds of public goods, because at that point you can just hook into a lot of these networks directly into their particular mechanisms, directly into their chains, and move value into the project. So that's some of the stuff that I would like to see happen. Cool. I think that's. I don't have an update yet on libp2p Foundation. The entity exists, but it's very small still. Our focus has been more on the fundraising and bootstrapping of the project. But we'll have more updates on that in the future. If there's any folks here that have strong interest in helping boot this up and helping participate on this and help work on the libp2p Foundation, come find me or come find Dave, and we'll work with you to help us boot this up. Cool. So now I wanted to finish with a little bit of a discussion of why libp2p in the first place. And this is I'll give you a little bit of an excerpt that I gave of a talk that I gave yesterday at the Cypherpunk Congress. At the end of the day, a lot of us got into Web3 and crypto because we cared about the internet and we care about securing the infrastructure of the internet. We built Web3 in order to bring verifiability to transactions online. And a lot of us really care about this range of values. There are specific rights that we would like to see encoded into the network at the network level. Things like freedom of speech, being able to control your data, reader and writer privacy, self-sovereign protocols, robust infrastructure that is not going to be hosted by one corporation changing its policies or one government changing its policies. When you think about the landscape of humanity over the next few decades, more and more of our lives is entirely online, and so much of what we depend on a day-to-day basis just comes down to the protocols that govern how the packets flow from our devices to other people's devices. And so the properties and security of the network stack give us all of this, right? So in the past, maybe it was rights in a document argued and protected with, muskets or whatever. Today, the rights are protected through code in big part. Not completely. There's wars, of course, still, unfortunately. But in a huge swaths of the world, human rights are protected by code. And so if we can put those rights into the code itself, we can end up with a much better infrastructure. So you can think of those individual values requiring specific protocols and systems to be built. A lot of us have been working, libp2p features in a bunch of these. And increasingly, it is the main part of a dependable layer. And one of the things that we're not currently ready is to being able to do completely oblivious routing of information packets. Today libp2p does not, doesn't give any strong privacy reader-writer privacy guarantees, and it'd be really great to move the network in that direction. What motivates a lot of crypto networks in general is avoiding certain kinds of bad outcomes with think of the internet as being able to be manipulated in a huge way where the infrastructure that has been built over the last 30 years can be used by all kinds of states to do mass surveillance. We know a lot of that is happening, but also social control, where you can start using the cameras everywhere around to hook those to incentive loops or punishment loops, and therefore implement a version of totalitarian control that the worst dictators in history would have only dreamed of. And this is only thinking about technology today. As you project forward and you think about how AI is going to develop, how robotics are going to develop, how neurotech is going to develop, so much of humanity is going to become deeply intertwined with our computing fabric. And the most important, most fundamental layer of all of that computing fabric is the basic networking protocols for how we move the packets. And so we need to bake in the security layer at the very, very bottom. And so a lot of us work on things like libp2p because we deeply care about this kind of problem. And more participants around the crypto ecosystem care about this. And so we need to leverage libp2p as a project to bring together that attention and orient it towards getting very practical outcomes here. I'll maybe suggest a few things that I think people should be working on, really sort of from the bottom up, is if we when libp2p started, we started with the stream-oriented connection stack, and that was kind of like a convenience thing in IPFS. And the goal was in 2014 to implement a packet stack into libp2p, and we just haven't yet. And today I think it's time for doing that. If we can build a packet stack for libp2p, then we can enable libp2p to be used for securing all kinds of other networks, things like VPNs, things like you can build protocols like Tor on top of it. You can build protocols like Vuvuzela and other anonymous routing type network protocols. You can then start using it for asynchronous message protocols like SMS or the Signal equivalent, and so on. So you can start fixing a lot of the underlying networking problems and start feeding libp2p into that part of the stack if we build a packet switch oriented network. And so you can think of libp2p as a fundamental building block. We need to enable it to work better with browsers. There's a whole bunch of effort around connecting libp2p with a set of browsers. And mobile. Mobile is a huge feature, a huge component of the web. And so making sure that libp2p runs really well on mobile is a key component in getting to this kind of success. So I want to reflect that a lot of people got into Web3 in general in order to greatly improve how the internet works, motivated libp2p as a protocol to build these much more secure and foundational components. And this is like a very worthwhile and important mission for the whole network. And it's great to see so many people already involved in this sort of thing. But it would be even greater to start creating roadmaps oriented towards achieving these kinds of outcomes. Like if we as a community can come together and establish very concrete things that need to happen, and now orient public goods funding towards having those happen, then maybe as an ecosystem we can orient a lot of the crypto community to get to these good outcomes sometime in the next few years. So yeah, I think I'll probably stop there because I've already made everybody way too late. So I'll maybe take a few questions and stop there. Thanks. Yeah, project and I'll repeat the question for the recording. Can you speak louder? I can't quite hear you. Yeah, so, and by the way, this 6 million a year, kind of when we set this target is we had this like 2.5 million for continuity. And now it took a lot longer to raise this. So this continuity, so though we are like 4 out of 6 for this year, some amount of that has to go into next year. And so we're not at 4 out of 6 for this year. We're actually 4 out of 12 for both years. And so today you can think of it as like, okay, great, we have continuity for both. But 2024 is still going, and so we can close more funding now and in Q1. And so I think one of the hurdles here is that just fundraising in general is super slow and time inefficient. And because the project is really scrappy and only getting small fractions of people's attention, things like this go slower. This is in big part why I want to move the fundraising on chain, because a lot of us have fundraised on chain. You can form capital extremely quickly if you have a very concrete and clear fundraising campaign structure, and participants can go directly and participate on chain. So that's a big reason for why I want to move more of these mechanisms directly on there, so that they can adjust over time automatically, and where we can have very clear, transparent flows of how that funding then gets allocated. You asked kind of how we're thinking about allocating it. The initial goal was to, if we raised the kind of 6 per year, was to do kind of 40, 40, 20. So 40% for retrofunding, 40% for proactive voting in the community, and only 20% for the set of us doing normal grants. That 20% is the main continuity stuff. So today, because we haven't raised as much, this is most of the funding is going here today and this is just funding the project in kind of the same ways that it has been funded for a few years. Is this core implementations, core security work, community work, and that's where most of the funding is going. We started the first smaller RetroPGF experiment. I want to increase that and get this to be a larger experiment for round 2. And I want to now boot up this mechanism to enable you as community participants to propose what we should be funding and direct it. And over time, I would like to decrease this edge and increase both of these edges as much as possible. But that depends on community participation. That has a cost, right? Like people have to be involved in discussing the thing and selecting the thing. And the more we can make this efficient, the better. My expectation is that as the years pass, LLMs are going to get better at helping with a lot of this in both writing and reviewing applications. And so it might be that the cost structure here gets way better for us as a community to be able to see ongoing rounds and to be able to individually review fairly good summaries of what's happening. So the more we can move on chain here, I think the easier it's going to be the more transparent and easier it's going to be for everything. So that's kind of the thinking here. Yeah. Other questions? And maybe I'll plug that in a lot of things that I've discussed, we need, the project needs support. The project is getting fractional support from a number of us that really care about the project and care about the mission, but we have a million things to do. You can imagine, I'm working on Falcon and IPFS and PL and advising a bunch of people and working on libp2p. So libp2p is only able to get a fraction of my attention. I really care about the project, therefore I'm doing this. But the project would really benefit from some folks around the network stepping up to help us do a bunch of this stuff, and think of it as a way of getting some directive ability of helping orient the project to where you want it to go. So if you're interested in working with us to do some of this funding work or fundraising work, or doing some of the community management, or helping us even design this sort of stuff, put your hand up, and we collaborated on all of this on Telegram anyway. So it should be, any kind of marginal help will be useful. Cool. Thanks very much.